Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Sabir, pronouns he, him, and I direct events here at the Strand. Before we launch into a discussion of tonight's, before we launch into a discussion of Julia Kaye's book, My Life in Transition, I'd like to share a little bit of history about the Strand. The Strand was founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass over on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled from 48 bookstores until, after over 94 years, the Strand is a sole survivor, now run by third generation owner Nancy Bass Wyden. Tonight, we are thrilled to have with us Julia Kaye for the launch of Julia's newest book, My Life in Transition. Julia Kaye is an award winning artist and illustrator whose webcomic, Up and Out, has garnered hundreds of thousands of readers and wide critical praise. Her commitment to activism has led to collaborations with nonprofit organizations such as the Trevor Project and Trans Lifeline. Her work has appeared on Webtoon, Go Comics, BuzzFeed, and the Disney animated show Big City Greens. Julia lives in Los Angeles. Joining Julia in conversation is Emily VanDerWerff. Emily is a critic at large for Vox and the first TV editor of the AV Club. Her work has also appeared in the Los Angeles Times, Salon, and Grantland. She is the host of the Vox Media podcasts I Think You're Interesting and Primetime. Her first book, Monsters of the Week, published in 2018. She lives with her wife in Los Angeles and an ever fluctuating number of cats. And so, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Julia and Emily to the stage.
Thank you so much, Spear. I just assume everybody was clapping for us in their own homes. That's
Oh,
what I did. I clapped for us.
oh, did you? Oh man, wait, I missed out my
Yeah.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you,
Beautiful.
audience. I have a history with Julia's work. Shortly after I first came out to myself, I was in a bookstore and I saw Super Late Bloomer on the shelves. And I picked it up, and then I picked up like three other things I didn't actually need. Because you know that thing where you're like early in transition and you're like, I'm going to buy the thing I want, but no, let no one know what's going on. And I know the clerk
Nobody could
didn't
know.
care. But that book became one of my go-tos for like telling people what was happening and like this is my life, and it was so nice to have it there, and it's so nice to have this book here now. And Julia, that's how I want to start. I just want to say thank you, Julia, for your work.
Thank you. That's so sweet. I didn't know that, and I'm kind of tearing up a little bit. That's beautiful.
That's okay. We'd been talking a little bit about this before we joined the stage, but one thing I think is so neat about My Life in Transition is there's a lot of writing about the first year, the first 18 months of being out. And then it kind of tapers off, because we move on, we have other things in our lives than just being trans. What I love about My Life in Transition is that it documents kind of the period after that. And I'm wondering like how you think about that, your relationship to transness in that regard.
Honestly, it's such relief to not have like those anxious thoughts and like this like to be bombarded with so much dysphoria on a daily basis, and anxiety about specifically about the way that my gender expression was interpreted by others and myself, and like just being impatient for the hormones to do their thing. That like I think it's so magical to be on the other side of all of that, to have been able to like to finally see that like the dysphoria and depression and the anxiety does subside in time, that like I mean it can really feel like you're in stasis during that first couple years, and it's such a relief to be able to feel like you've navigated enough experiences as yourself, you've stumbled along, and maybe made mistakes, and did your best to figure out who you are and what you want to be, I guess,
Hmm.
how you want to move
Hmm.
about the world. And yeah, that life is able to settle down, and that you're able to really embrace the fact that life moves on again.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also like, I don't quite know how to say this, but like transition is like a thing we can tell the cis about, because it has like an arc to it. It's like, oh, you come out and then you do the thing and you change and boom, you're a new person. It like has a beginning and middle and end. But for all of us, it's a lifelong process, you know? Like the name of the book is My Life in Transition. And I'm wondering, like, obviously a lot of the big discoveries and big changes or whatever are for those first few months. But I'm wondering, what are the discoveries you made in the period you chronicled in this book?
Honestly, if I could take a slight departure from that,
Yeah,
and
sure.
I think you made a really a good observation with that. In that, part of the reason that I felt a need to go back and make a second book was because I was looking at the landscape of trans-related media, and so much of it ends up just retreading on just that first year, on like, or the first couple years, like, because it's big, it's loud, it's awkward, it's interesting. Like, there's this othering light. Like, once you're on the other side of it, you're like, oh yeah, it's all focused on this aspect, which is this tiny little beginning area, and you have the rest of your life to live. What does that mean to you? Because you don't magically become cis at the end of the 2 years or whatever. Like, it's so much about embracing change, and finding self acceptance for yourself, and finding it in others, and it's such a beautiful thing that isn't talked enough about, or shown in media enough. And I think that that's incredible. Um, I cannot remember what the second part, what the actual question was now.
I was wondering, the period you document in this book, what are some of the particularly big discoveries or big changes that you found as you were sort of talking about this?
Oh, sure, sure. Um, I don't know. As I became more comfortable in my own skin, I started being able to kind of dissect, like, think more keenly on, like, the way that I present myself, like, not feeling such a need to lean on so many stereotypical expressions of gender, and like find out what and really embrace things that just make me feel comfortable, because
Hmm.
I'm just not worrying so much about your gender expression. Um, and um, a wonderful thing that I just discovered, as my life went on, was that as dysphoria and the depression, like, didn't play such a large role in my life anymore, I had more capacity to live, to let others into my life, and find so many like-minded people to befriend. And I think that's really strongly represented in the book, in comparison to Super Late Bloomer,
Hmm.
which is entirely focused on anxieties about, like, the way that that way that one is perceived,
Yeah.
and trying to find inner self acceptance. Yeah, just like, it's a much more diverse, populated world that I'm able
Hmm.
to inhabit, just because 90% of my brain space isn't constantly bombarded with taking on new experiences in relation to gender and transness, that
Yeah.
you're able to just leave that behind and be the person, or in my case, the woman that I am.
Yeah. Yeah. As a reminder to our attendees, our audience, you can ask questions and we will be answering some of those at the end of this session, uh, presumably of Julia, but if you want to ask me about my cats, happy to answer. Um, I saw this there. I'm reading the chat, and I saw this really interesting thing that came through. So it's by Rin Martins. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, and they say, so there's so much focus on trauma and trans narratives, and trauma is super important, of course, but I love how much of Julia's work, I love trauma. I love how much of Julia's work is just about daily life. And I'm really thinking about, like, this is in a comic strip format, you know, like a Peanuts or a Calvin and Hobbes or whatever. And I think about the comic strip as like depicting long periods of time, because those things will run for years and years and years. And it's always just a slice of life. And I'm wondering what about that form is the right way to tell this story.
I think it's the perfect way to tell a story. I mean, like, I'm biased because, like, you know, I made it and whatever, and it's my baby and I feel really strongly about it. But I grew up with newspaper comics, and, you know, I would read the comic section every morning, like top to bottom, even though I only really enjoyed maybe 2 or 3 of them. So many of them were just mediocre or whatever, but I loved the format that, like, you could check in with these characters, even if there was no real evolution of character. Maybe 1 or 2 there were, but, like, that you could, like, there was something so powerful about being able to see check in with characters on a daily basis, as opposed to, like, you can binge a TV show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it lives in your mind in that time period, and maybe you reflect on it after you've watched it. But for comics, it was just a regular daily part of your life, maybe for years. And so, I mean, like, the reason that I chose that format was purely out of necessity, because when I was creating the comics that went to become Super Late Bloomer, I didn't know anybody that was trans. I didn't know how to talk to my family or anybody else about what I was going through. I didn't know how to, like, I didn't have the words to describe to anybody. I didn't know how to be honest with myself about, like, to other people. I was too terrifying. But I was a working cartoonist, and so it made sense to like, create, like, a really small, constrained project that I could, like, just check in with myself, like, just unplug from the internet and, like, have, like, a little daily sketchbook that wouldn't be too much of a burden, that I could check in with myself on a daily basis and, like, figure, what is the most important or emotionally all-encompassing thing that happened today, to help me navigate what I was going through, sort of a art therapy sort of situation. And I think there's something, like, immensely, you know, the comic strip, newspaper strip format has existed for so long now, and, like, it was immensely popular throughout the 20th century, onward. It's still straggling along, but, like, there's something so powerful about it that, like, the reason that why it's stayed around for so long. And I think that there's just something so inherently accessible about distilling characters and concepts to such a small little slice of digestible information that you can take in within a few seconds.
Yeah.
And yeah, creating a series of the end result of checking in on a daily basis throughout this is creating a series of, like, micro vignettes, to be a fly on the wall in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's just something so powerful about that I personally haven't seen. I don't know that it can be quite replicated in any other formats, so efficiently and powerfully.
Yeah.
If I can toot my own horn, toot toot.
Absolutely, toot. That's what we're here for. Toot. I do think there is something about the way that the daily comic strip normalizes, you know, identities, lives, things like that. Like, you can talk about hard things in your life, you can talk about joyful things in your life. It's not just one story, it's a whole bunch of little stories. And I find that a really interesting idea.
Yeah, the complexity of those emotions. You can have something that's, like, so euphoric and so traumatizing the next day, and, like, it makes sense. Because that's just the way that life goes. It ebbs and flows. And I think maybe it's because I'm really close to the project. But, like, when going back and editing the comics that went to become My Life in Transition, now available. When, like, I could see the way that, like, big events, like, made emotional ripples in my daily life, whereas like, it would affect decision-making processes that I had days and weeks later, even if it wasn't on a daily basis. The way that just events affect our lives. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah. I think it's also a way to, you and I are both trans women in the public eye. So there are people who like
In
look
the
up to
private eye
us.
too.
Yeah, in the private eye too. There are people who look up to us for whatever reason. And I think what's interesting about your books is that they get into the joy and the sadness and the drama and the comedy and all of this in a way that I find approachable, because you are not like focused on any of those particular emotions. And like, I do find that when people come and talk to me, they kind of want to know everything's going to be okay. And I can't promise them everything's going to be okay, because the process of being human means not everything is going to be okay.
Absolutely.
But like, this is a way to tell people, you know, things sometimes won't be okay, but you will get past them. You are yourself now, and that's everything. Yeah.
It's okay for things to not be okay. Absolutely. That's something that I personally have a distaste for in media, when things are taken to be too saccharine, I guess, particularly in trans-related media, like that. Like I've like there wasn't much. I mean, even though it was only like 5 years ago now, like there really didn't feel like there was too much trans-related media that I found to be easily accessible when I was transitioning or going through the very early stages of self-acceptance. And yeah, what little I found in comic form tend to be over like smoothing out all of the wrinkles in a way that I just couldn't find relatable. It just didn't speak to the reality of the situation, which is that, you know, it's not always easy, because that's not inherent to transness, as you said. You know, it's just that's being a human, baby.
Yeah, yeah. What do you find useful about like sharing those darker moments? Like, I know when I read your comic starting out, I found great solace in reading those darker moments. But I know that can be too much for some trans people. So I'm wondering like how you approach, even, you know, not every strip has a joke in it, but every strip has like kind of a lightly comedic tone. And I wonder how you approach some of those darker things within that tone.
Sure. I think that's a fascinating insight. I came from making gag comics. I was influenced by like humor strips and whatever. I used to make absurdist gag humor strips for a number of years before switching to a 180 to honest, raw autobiographical content. Honestly, I was really burned out by the time I was like nearing the end of my run of those days. But like I knew how the beats of a comic flowed, how to do a short narrative that had like that punchline beat at the end. And when I was making these, it just sort of intuitively made sense to have, if not a punchline, like to diverge away from that and create, you know, an emotional beat there. So that it still carries the same weight, but sometimes it's instead of a punchline, it's, you know, it's a punch to your gut.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really fascinating to me to like have been able to subvert those expectations, which is inherently comedic. You know, it's all about telling a joke is all about subverting expectations. So,
yeah. You have accidentally opened up a giant Pandora's box of questioning that I had forgotten to even approach, which is, I'm a huge newspaper comic strip fan. I'm just a geek for that stuff. I adore it. And Julia, I need to know your favorites. Like, what are your favorite strips of all time?
Okay. So, childhood, first favorite, baby's first fave, Garfield. Okay, so like, you know, there was a huge wave of Garf fever back in like the 80s through the 90s, and like I I'd get those giant books and I'd read them like cover to cover, like starting from 78 all the way through. Just beautiful. Like it was like reading a Saturday morning cartoon. It was like it tapered off. It got stale and bad as the years went on.
Mm.
but beautiful. And then I came to hate it because I was too dumb. And then I had a cynical, ironic love of it. Now I just love it.
Hmm.
I love foxtrots.
Mm.
I didn't relate to it obviously because I was a kid, but like I loved the style of Baby Blues.
Mm.
Jumpstart was great. God, Gary Larson's Far Side,
Parasite, yeah.
uh, Calvin and Hobbes, obvi.
Mm.
Um, I didn't relate to it because it had like a lot of Christian themes, I believe. But For Better or Worse was kind of amazing in that it allowed the characters to actually grow and change over time.
Mhm.
Like the characters grew up. That was a game changer. I was like, why don't other strips do that?
Mhm.
Luann, loved
Yeah.
Luann.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Gosh.
I actually didn't like Peanuts too much. I wanted to like it. It was fine.
Well, that's it for this event, everybody.
Oh no! I
Just
went
kidding.
back. I love the early years of Peanuts. I think
Yeah.
Charles Schultz had a comedic genius. The
Mm.
early years.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like at this point, like I read everything down to like Fox, Rex Morgan, MD. Terrible comic. I was like this like 7-year-old child, this little baby reading like this like serious like medical drama, or like
Mhm.
as much as you could have a serious medical drama in like 2 panels every day.
That was
What
me
about
with
yourself? Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was me with Mary Worth. I would read Mary Worth and just be like, "What is
yeah.
happening?" Um, no, I adore Peanuts. I adore Calvin and Hobbes. For better or for worse, really affected how I think about storytelling in a lot of interesting
Mhm.
ways. I'm still extremely mad about how Elizabeth ended up with Anthony. I don't want to talk about it. It's a very bad thing that happens. Uh, I do want to ask, like where, what sort of influenced your art style? Like, who were big influences on the way you draw, the way you think about how art should be carried out in this space?
Sure. Yeah. I guess I was from like webcomics. Webcomics made making comics accessible, I guess.
Mhm.
I was originally going to go to school to make comics because like that's all I wanted to do with my life. But when I was going to school, like webcomics hadn't taken off in a major way the way that they exist now. And like print comics, I didn't see myself in, but like the ones that I loved were so near and dear to my heart. Casey Green's Gun Show was immensely huge. Kate Beaton's work,
Mm.
definitely like her sense of humor definitely played a role. Um, as far as autobiographical content, Yuko Ota and Anant's Johnny Wander was incredible. Just to see that evolve. Erica Moen's Dar, which was a queer autobiographical comic, was fabulous. Um, but yeah, I mean Casey Green definitely above head and shoulders above everyone. And then like I've been working in the animation industry the last 5 years over on Big City Greens, and I have a lot of friends that are in the industry, and so I've since then been influenced more by um, modern animation style, like current styles,
Mm.
I suppose.
Yeah. Mm.
It just bleeds in.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, please.
I want to throw a shout out to the chat. If anybody has not read it, there's a comic strip called Real Life Comics. It's a web comic,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, last July, the author May Dean came out as trans, and her story of coming out as trans in her 30s is so similar to mine. And if you're looking for something like that, like it's really beautifully done.
Can I interject?
Sure.
On that note,
Mhm.
that Real Life was the first webcomic that I ever read.
Oh my goodness.
I was such a huge fan, such a huge fan. I followed like the blog updates and like things about her life as it was back then. And then like I fell off of it, and as life went on and whatever. And like recently, like she came out and we reconnected, and now like we had this really beautiful mutual exchange where like mutual admiration for each other,
Mm.
where it was really beautiful,
Yeah.
and now we're friends.
Amazing.
It's really cute. Love
Yeah.
her.
Um, I honestly, I think a lot about how the internet has made, for a lot of trans people, it's made it possible to figure out who we are. We can make art that expresses ourselves. We can read Reddit threads or whatever, that give us answers to questions. We can
Oh
follow
yeah.
our favorite trans people on Twitter. But there is kind of a weight to being performatively trans online all the time that I know I feel. And I'm wondering if you
Yeah.
ever feel that, like, do I ever just get to be the weird lady who has bad taste in television or whatever, whatever people think about me beyond my transness. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Early on when like it's all encompassing, the transition and the sport, and like you're just taking in so much, and you're looking up to other people as your own like personal heroes in the trans pantheon. You're taking in so much. Like I feel like for a good 2 or 3 years, it came very naturally. I didn't like. I hate the idea of being performatively trans online. Um, like, and it made sense, and it felt good. It felt right. And I loved connecting with others on that level.
Mhm.
But definitely, as the years have gone by, I've tapered off of doing that, and I find I very rarely talk about being trans. I mean, like occasionally I'll have a dumb pun or something that I'll
Mhm.
put out there just for the sake of scratching an itch.
Mhm.
Um, but like if I wasn't posting this autobiographical content specifically, through the narrative lens of my being trans, it would very rarely come up.
Mhm.
And part of me actually, like, I kind of look forward to the day where like I like to move on from that to find to really lean into other interests and other facets of my being that extend beyond transness and gender, and just have my yeah, I don't know, we're complex individuals, like we have
Yeah.
a lot going on outside of
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
little. I appreciate that, like there are some people that like make entire careers out of exploring that and like
Mhm.
teaching others. um I personally try to go out of my way to not teach people about
Yeah.
like I made this book about my experience for trans people first and foremost.
Mhm.
I don't make any effort to over explain anything,
Yeah.
very, very purposefully.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you want to hold the book up again so people can see the cover of the
I'd
book?
love to. I'd
Yeah.
love to.
That's
Very,
My
very
Life in
proud. I don't.
Transition. There's a button at the bottom you can push to purchase this book. It's excellent. Um,
The button
um,
and the book.
the button and the book. Yes, the button is beautiful. We will be answering some of your questions in about 15 minutes, so please remember to submit them. In the meantime, I do want to ask you a question about that, about catering something to trans people as opposed to cis people, because I know what you mean, but I cannot explain it. Like in my brain, I'm like, I know what it means to write something for a trans audience as opposed to a cis audience. But at the same time, I'm like, as someone who's written trans characters in my own fiction, I'm always like, who am I talking to here? And I'm wondering how you determine that audience.
I do have some essays in the book, and like I don't know, for me, I assume a level of innate understanding of transness. I
Mm-hmm.
don't explain the use of terminology. Like there's no glossary, there's no index, there's no this is what cisgender means. Here is what trans means. Here is what any given term is. I don't know. It's just the assumption that you don't need to do trans 101
Mm-hmm.
on any level, I guess. And like I said, like I appreciate people that do that. Like I think it's really important work that needs to exist.
Yeah.
But we don't all need to make it, I personally want to make I'd love to make art and work that features representation across the LGBTQ plus spectrum, without any over explanation. Maybe have a trans woman that like you wouldn't even know, like maybe there's a small glimmer of something,
Yeah.
or just having it imbued into the narrative as opposed to it being a coming out story, which it always is a coming out story,
Yeah.
or a way that
Yeah.
trauma storytelling.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
I remember many years ago, before I was out to myself, I wrote a trans character, supporting character, into a script, and she was not like, her being trans was not important to the story. It was just like, she is trans, and that's just like a thing that's true about her. She's also all these other things. And my manager was like, "Why is she trans if it's not like important to the story?" And I was like, "Because I just think it's neat." Anyway, a few years later, I came out. Um, but yeah,
Why not, MRF?
but yeah, I do think about
No
that a lot, about how like about how often our stories are boiled down to, oh, and then they change. And like, I realize we keep coming back to that theme, but like, I just love the idea that like, you can be looked up to by people such as myself for like just talking about like, well, you know what, today kind of sucked. And like, I love that there is that space for that in a way that there wasn't always when I was looking for this, you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, and like what I find fascinating is like, even though that life moves on, like you're still living and existing as a trans person, the royal we all live as trans people, with our own experiences in relation to that. Like there's a point in one of the comics in my life in transition. I go through a breakup, and I make a there was a day where I had the realization like why the relationship was so important to me, because like it was the first relationship I had with somebody that saw me as trans, like that saw me not as trans, as a woman, and like
Mhm.
really was able to validate that and how important that was for me. Like it had nothing to do with anxiety or like the act of transitioning itself. It was just the state of being somebody, a woman of trans experience, you
Mhm.
know
Mhm. Mhm.
like the lens is always there, even though there are swaths of comics that have nothing to do with transness. Anything that I create is going to be imbued with it, because
Yeah.
that's just the lens with which I view and exist in the world.
Mm. Mhm. I um I think a lot about, we use this metaphor second puberty for transition
Oh
because
yeah.
it's a useful metaphor. It kind of helps people understand, especially trans people, understand what they're in for. What they're in for. I mean, that sounds so threatening. But I do think about when I first came out, and I was like, I felt like a 13-year-old girl who was like looking at the cool trans ladies on Twitter and being like, oh my God, the seniors are so great. And I wish I could go sit with the seniors at lunch. And now people talk to me like that. People are like, oh, look at this cool girl and I still feel
Mhm.
like that weird 13-year-old girl. So I'm wondering, Julia, as a cool girl of the internet, if you have adjusted to being a cool girl of the internet that people really look up to.
I mean, like yes. I mean, like I think it's very fun, and like it's really heartwarming that people have connected with my work in the way that they have. I think it's really fascinating in that I was actually reading this fine piece of literature last night, because I was like, hey, what's actually going on here? It's been a while since I've checked in on it. I actually, like, I'm emotionally disconnected from it. Like I see a series of events that happened in my life. It doesn't emotionally resonate with me on any level, and I think it's really fascinating that people do. To the extent, in the pre-pandemic world, people would come up to me regularly in public and thank me. I think that's beautiful. That's incredible. I'm so glad that I have been able to be that beacon for so many people. Um, I uh, I honestly, on so many levels, that helped me find my own self-acceptance in a way.
Mhm.
Like this connection, of like it doesn't feel so much as like being on a pedestal, so much as just other people wanting to reach out to like-minded people. So many of my current friends have been born of talking about my life online through originally the comics that went to become Super Late Bloomer. Most of my friends, honestly, where people had just reached out to me because of that. Um, so I guess I've adjusted, and like I don't know, it's been just a really nice boon to my life to be able to come in contact with so many wonderful people like yourself, for instance. I feel so fortunate that we get to hang out right now,
Yeah,
even though it is a little one-sided, this conversation
yeah,
necessarily.
yeah.
You're wonderful. This is great.
Thank you. Yeah, we're like less than 10 miles apart, but it feels like we're like a continent apart because of this stupid thing we're living through right now. Um, I do want to say that the chat room has been coming up with new names for puberty 2, and
Has anyone said reduberty?
what's that?
Has anyone said reduberty?
No, I like that. I'm going to give the prize to Dara, who said puber 2. I think puber 2 is great.
Oh, that's very good.
Yeah. um,
Puber 2, the puberting.
um, I do. So when you are drawing from your real life in this way, and I assume a lot of these strips are based on real events, how does turning those events into art, how does that help you? How does that help your process of dealing with these things emotionally, whether they're happy, whether they're sad? How does pinning them down on paper help you process them?
Something about like that's real. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. Um, I saw this interview with Jack Black once, and he was talking about this movie they made, School of Rock.
Mhm.
And I bring this up because he mentioned that like one of the few times he's ever felt like he knew exactly where he was and like who he was and what he was doing with his life, like that he was doing exactly what he was meant to be doing in his life was while creating that movie. Like something about like the plants aligned, and like he just felt like this is my life's purpose. And I felt that while creating these comics, even though like I made them ostensibly for myself first and foremost, and then like let them sit for a few months before deciding whether or not it was something I was comfortable or wanted to, even if it was worth releasing to the public. um Something about the act of distilling really complex, I don't know, life moves really really quickly, and I have a tendency to live in the past or the future, and very rarely in the present. And it becomes very meditative for me to really slow down and just like really get into the swing of focusing on my emotional state and the way that things affect me. Um, which I feel like part of which is like has a lot to do with for so long, pre-transition I had my walls up. It's like all of the walls up of the castle of my mind, to protect myself emotionally. I was very emotionally disconnected and from who I was, and for whatever reason, going through the process, the motions of focusing on my on each day for an hour or hour and a half, um, would really do a lot to allow me to very clearly understand my mental state,
Yeah.
and really feel like I have a grip on like this new stage of life that I had entered.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, you also work in animation. Tell me a little
Mhm.
bit about what the different sides of, working in a format that ostensibly the drawings move and change, and then working in a format where the drawings are static and you read them. What do those different creative challenges feed in you?
Um, Honestly, I mean, I feel very fortunate for I was scouted off of my webcomic to work for Disney. So like I didn't really have any inherent intentions to work in animation, or aspirations, and then I kind of fell in love with it as I fell into the swing of things. And it became like this beautiful boot camp of learning fundamentals, and really forcing me to up my visual game. you may notice that like visually the drawings are maybe a little bit a bunch tighter in the second book rather than the first one, which I think is I think some of the best working artists are working in animation today. Like there's such like you need to be able to work so dynamically, so quickly, and have such an amazing grasp on visual storytelling. And it's really gotten me to change the way that it's really influenced the way that, I see the blank page, and like what you can visually do within a comic panel itself. It's definitely presents its own challenges in that, like, it's such a compartmentalized industry where everybody has a very specific job and it's a team group efforts, and there's a lot of editorial oversight, obviously working for a corporation at the end of the day. Um, so you're not as able to make things that are quite as personal, I guess. I don't know. There's something that I think is really beautiful about being able to have complete control over the narrative and like make something that's wholly myself, by making comics that I am unable to see now or in the future being able to really embrace quite as directly through animation,
Yeah.
even if you're able to ostensibly create a different form of representation through characters and concepts and such.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just such very different um, medias to work within.
Yeah. I've been admiring your hair this whole answer. I've just been like, your hair is so great. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. I was the result of a genetic experiment between two very curly individuals.
It must be fun hair to draw too. Like,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I had a different last question prepared, but the chat has been on this question of when do you know you've made it in transition? And I am fascinated by that question because for me, I kind of knew I made it when I came out because that was the hardest thing to do in my life, to get to that point and be like, oh, I'm a girl. My name is Emily. And that's always been true. And like clawing my way to that was so hard. And then once I was past it, it was like everything followed. But also when a weird old man flirted with me at the farmer's market the other week, I was like, I've really made it. But I'm wondering, like, how do you feel about that question of like when you've made it in transition?
Yeah, I'm like while you're saying that, like I feel your response so intensely, and like I'm not sure how to parse that for myself. I mean, certainly, as far as hurdles go, coming out was the biggest. First to originally to a relate like the person I was in a relationship with for a few years. That was I remember trying to have like that conversation over and over and over on like daily walks, and like I still don't know how I broke through to have that, and then to like but then like also doing that with my family and people that like I had grown up with, um, because like particularly like I feel like getting on the other side of that just because like I don't know, they're like you're breaking people's expectations of what they assumed they knew about you, while simultaneously still trying to like you're possibly still struggling with self-acceptance yourself, or at least I was at the time, um, with my own um, yeah, just self-acceptance as a woman. Like I was like I don't like I know that my body is wrong and that I need to fix it in X, Y, and Z ways, but like to get to a place of self-acceptance, like that didn't come for some time, so to take that leap of faith and really get on the other side of coming out, to to people that knew you your whole life, like that's I honestly at this point in time in my life, like I can't imagine having that strength to have those conversations. Like that's immense.
Yeah. The part where you finally embrace both the trans and the woman in Trans Woman is just so powerful to me. that part where you're like, oh, I am trans and I'm a woman and I'm good with both of those things is really.
It's it's funny. I actually don't I don't really identify with the term trans
Yeah.
as part of my identity. I never really have. I think it's a really useful tool to discuss
Mhm.
the or like the existence that I've had. But like I've never once felt like that was part of my identity. It was
Yeah.
more of just growing into being the woman that I always was.
Yeah.
Externally becoming and being able to be validated and seen as the way that like I have always known on some level that I always was.
Yeah.
Um, Nowadays, I am much more apt to describe myself as just a queer woman, just because of the ambiguity of it. Or if I don't want that erased, I'll be a woman of trans experience, just because that speaks to the lived experience of that.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, because like it never felt like trans always feels like like I guess it feels very external. Like people interpreted me that way, so like I guess that's like it means on the other across or on the other side or different from like what you were assigned at birth. But the feelings were always there.
Yeah.
My gender never changed.
No. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I really I agree with that. I use trans woman as a useful identifier, I guess, but it is like, yeah, it is like it does create the sense that you changed in a way that is not necessarily true. And with that said, we're going to take questions from the audience. I want to start with the question from Laura, who asks, "Are there any other creators that focus on trans joy that you would recommend?"
trans joy, interesting. That's a really good question. I don't know if I have a great answer for that, honestly. So much of the arts the artists that I follow, and I don't know, the people that whose work I follow tend to be the same variety as me, in that like they'll be very honest and raw about the emotions and experiences that they've been through, and those aren't always pleasant experiences.
Mhm.
Um, Honestly, off the top of my head, like like I don't know that like I can think of too much trans joy in careers just off the top of my head. Of course, like
Yeah.
that to go with that, like you ask me like my favorite movie, like I will never be able to tell you a single movie I've seen once. I know that I've seen movies, but like I can't think of a single one right now.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's a terrible answer.
No, it's okay. I recommend my own work. No.
Yeah, please do.
There is a book called Little Blue Encyclopedia for Vivian, which is by Hazel Jane Plant. That is a sad book, but a very joyful book. It is about a trans woman who has lost her best friend. And it is so much more about celebrating the life of someone you've lost. That would be my recommendation. Also, my scripted podcast, Arden, features a trans woman in season 2, and she has a pretty good life. Um,
Hell yeah.
how this is a question from Ella, and she asks, "How has your experience of transition been impacted by the pandemic/quarantine?" She's asking as someone whose transition has been 80% in quarantine so far, and I think you and I have a different relationship to that. But I'm curious to hear how being in quarantine has affected your experience of yourself.
I mean, it's terrible. I mean, outside of the pandemic being what it is, and like this is coming from a very privileged perspective, obviously,
Mhm.
as I do have a job and I am living in a house with a bunch of people, with four other roommates that who I adore. Two of which are artists, so we have a little bit of an artist studio commune feel, and we're all very mature and like not at each other's throats and like on great and like doing great. Um, and yeah, I very rarely, if ever, leave my house. So with that acknowledged, I abhor it. It's terrible, in that like I finally feel like I've reached a place of such strong self-acceptance and self-actualization in like trying, and like I finally become the me that I've always wanted to be, as far as feeling like I can take charge and like do what I want and be the woman that I was always meant to be. But you know, now like nobody can see me. Nobody, like I can't be a person. I can't
Yeah.
be not that like, you know, external validation is a thing, but like this is quite all encompassing. But like I want to be a person. I wanna now I feel like I'm on the other side of it all, and I just want to live.
Yeah.
But I mean, outside of that, like I don't know, it's been super great for me in that on the flip side, in that like I only exist around people that know and love me. And so I have been misgendered in like since it began. So that's a delight.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's easy to forget what the pain of like that existential pain can be like.
Yeah. I know so many people whose entire experience of transness is within this quarantine, and it is so hard to like want to be reflected back from the people you see, and like the only people you see are your cats, you know, or whatever, and they don't care, they just sleep through everything. um, I want to ask you a slightly less weighty question from
Mhm.
Catherine, who asks, in one of the panels in the new book, you state, I don't like IPAs. What kind of beer do you like?
Hefeweizens are fabulous. Like a good sour. Like it feels like the cider of beers.
Mhm.
Um, that's delightful. A saison, I think they're called in general. Um, I think that's it. I don't like hoppiness. I honestly like I'm more of a whiskey drinker, honestly.
Yeah. hmm I I have come to love red wine because I am a white woman of a certain age. Um,
Lean into it. That's all you can do.
um, we have another question here. As someone who doesn't have a lot of trans femme friends, I've not been able to get too much evidence on this. But did you have a specific arc when it came to fashion? I noticed for myself, there was definitely an arc when I first started. I leaned hard into feminine styles, then eventually leaned more toward a subdued style. Now, as I feel as if I finally have my own style. What's been your journey with fashion, Julia?
About a month ago, I was looking through old selfies on like my Dropbox, you know, from like the first few years, and like, oof, those were I would not want to go back to those baby tran days. It was really rough. Not fully having a great idea of what styles worked for me, and the differentiation. I just wanted to wear everything and anything, and I still do. And then like eventually settled into kind of an edgier. I got to be the edgy, cool punk slash goth sort of style that I had always wanted to embrace when I was a teen, which was great. That was great for me. Um, much more as the pandemic has worn on, I've certainly embraced much more casual, just cutesy things, things that make me feel warm and cozy. Early on, like I definitely leaned hard into super feminine things, and then yeah, I subdued that for a long time. And honestly, I've kind of looped back to it. I don't know. Like I feel like as a reaction to those to that, like I don't know, I to embracing hyper feminine, feeling like, oh, I don't need this anymore. I don't want I can do other things, and it felt great for a while. And I realized, that was another just that was very reactionary of me, and I actually really like feminine things. And so I wear dresses on most days just because it's cute and easy. Just one piece of. I love a cloth tube.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's all it is.
Yeah. I have started wearing a lot of sweaters this winter, and my friend jokingly describes them as my Taylor Swift sweaters. And I don't care. I look like Taylor Swift. She's pretty. That'd be fine. It's fine with me.
Absolutely, love
Um,
a sweater.
I have a question here from Hannah or Hannah. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. Hi, Julia. Thank you for creating such inspirational books / stories for many in the LGBT plus community. I first heard about you from Up and Out on Webtoons, and it has helped me so much during an unfavorable time when I came out. How do you avoid writer's block when writing an autobiographical comic? I'm thinking about writing an autobiographical comic about my life as a trans woman, but I'm always worried if I'm saying too much. Thank you for being a wonderful role model in my life.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Also, that blows my mind that somebody followed me from those days. That's beautiful. God, writer's block. The problem with a daily autobiographical strip that I found is, life is generally really mundane and low key. Like you go through the same motions every day. And like you kind of like looking for things that like that resonate with you to rise above the mundanity. Like what's more interesting, what's actually going on, underneath all of it emotionally, even if like you're just going through the motions of like going to work and then washing dishes and taking out the trash. What else is there? What's going on underneath the surface? But as far as so that I always found like that was a really tricky hurdle to overcome too, which is born of writer's block. It's like, well, okay, what do I even do today? Because it was a very daily project for me. Honestly, the biggest advice I have is to set a schedule for yourself and stick to it. Like you have deadlines. That's part of the reason why I made it a daily project for myself and made it manageable, that like it wouldn't take so long that like I would get overwhelmed and like would blow it off for a day or two, because like that would become 3 or 4 days, and then like I would completely lose control of the entire project. If you have the first few weeks were hard, but then you just get into the swing of it, and like this is just an hour of the day that like I don't that's not free. This is just something that I do every day. And once you get into the mindset of needing to stick to a deadline, writer's block is a non-issue. Make something.
Yeah.
That's
Mhm.
really the only way to get around it, is make something bad. Who cares? Embrace that it's bad. I don't know. You're not some if you look at the comics, some of them are quite crudely drawn in comparison to others, just because I wasn't particularly inspired that day.
Well, I cannot tell, for one, because no, they're all wonderful. Just a couple more. Mia asks, what kind of stories are y'all excited to see in media once we move past the transplaining phase?
God, transplaining. Honestly, like in animation, it's been really warming my heart to see that more queer identities are starting to like they're trailblazers that are making shows that are really making headway to make that more possible. Like we're past like the first wave of trans positive media. Like we're well into like they're like seeing rumblings of what will be possible in the near future. What's currently being created that'll be coming out in the next few years. That's like seeing on like Shira, like there was a non-binary character. Like that's wonderful. Like honestly, on a societal level, like 5 years ago, nobody your average person had never heard of the term non-binary. Like it's not necessarily something that needed to be over explained, which is incredible. As far as specific projects, I don't know. I'm very excited to see what comes out, and I'm very excited to create the projects that I would like to see in the world.
Yeah. Like I said, I love that the internet lets us make our own art and tell our own stories and put it out there, and then people can find it, and it can be collected in lovely book form.
Incredible.
I have this. My last question comes from Avery. Look at that book cover. Look at that book cover. Avery Pearson asks,
Gorgeous. Look at that sheen. Woo.
Wow. Wow. What a lovely book.
I'm thinking about picking up a
Avery,
copy.
Avery Pearson asks, I'm sorry if this is too personal, but my question is, how do you think you as a kid would respond to today's trans representation in the media?
Gosh. I mean, I don't think about it a lot, but I definitely thought about it. I mean, it would be life changing. It would be life changing. All that existed to me as a kid, as far as trans representation, were things that were so removed from actual trans lives and experiences that like I didn't actually recognize it as representation, as even poor representation of myself. That you had your Ace Ventura Pet Detective, where like the crux of the movie is that a trans woman transitions, and that's bad and gross, I guess.
Yeah.
Like I didn't recognize that for what it was. Although I do think that that deserves a reboot where like it's actually embraced that like that she's just transitioned. I think there's something in that that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And God, the Rent, the Broadway show slash movie. I saw the movie and like I didn't realize that there was a trans character in it. I thought that that character was just an effeminate man. Which is the way that like all media seem to play off all trans women. Um, I Yeah, it would be life changing. What was fantasy for me on a daily basis, seeing comics like Ranma, where like a boy could had the ability to magically change into a girl at basically at will. That was just that was a flight of fancy.
Yeah.
That was just filling the hours of the day for me. Uh, I I can't even imagine the impact that it would have. I can't fathom the idea of having the language to be able to describe what I was feeling at an early age.
Yeah.
The sheer power. I see that in trans youth, and that my heart just soars for them. Like that, just how much they know now. It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wish I had had your comic when I was 13, 14, 15. It would have helped a lot. I would have been so heartened to see it. But I'm also glad that I have it now that I'm, don't tell anybody, 40. Um, it's our little secret. All
Just you
100
and
and
me. It's
all,
just us here. So
yeah,
don't worry
just us. Yeah. But the book is My Life in Transition. There is a button you can click to buy it, or Julia can show you the cover again. It's a wonderful
God,
book. Yeah.
look at these comics. Wow.
Wow. And yeah, you can purchase that and her earlier book, Super Late Bloomer. Also fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, Julia.
Thank you so much, Emily. It was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you both so much, Julia and Emily, for a wonderful and thoroughly engaging conversation. It was an honor to have you with us tonight.
Thank you
And
so much
I
to
think
you.
you're welcome. Emily did handily pointed out the green purchase button, which saves me from having to do it again. But there it is. And that note, everyone have a wonderful night, and thank you so much for spending your evening with us.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.